I want to tell you about a love story. So I was at this bar on a Tuesday night, getting to know this 65-year-old guy. Now, a few words in, I could already tell he was exactly what I was looking for. You see, I was broke and he owned real estate. I wanted to invest and he was ready to retire. I was gay and, well, he didn't care. We were a match made for each other. So that night, one thing led to another, and I bought his triplex with only $500 out of pocket, a purchase that made me a millionaire in my 30s. Now, before I share the juicy details of how that went down, let me take you back in time with me. So it's 2009, and I'm 21 years old. I'm sitting at a dinner table drinking Zinfandel and eating filet mignon with 7 of my roommates. As we did most nights, celebrating. We did it. We just graduated into the worst economy in almost 100 years. Tanked by banks handing out loans to, well, anyone with a pulse. So instead of full steam ahead into our careers, we steamed cappuccinos at Starbucks. And yet, night after night, we ate like kings and queens. How did we do it? Well, we got all that delicious food straight out of the dumpster. Now, before you judge me, hear me out. This was perfectly good food, still frozen, mostly, tossed out days before the expiration date. No? All right, I get it. My parents didn't understand either. They even got mad. It was like, Mom, can't you see? I'm turning debris into charcuterie. Now, don't worry, my TED Talk is not how to dumpster dive your way to riches, but this story illustrates the first lesson I want to share with you. And I created this complex mathematical formula to prove my point. I learned that community plus creativity could save us some money, at least on our grocery bill. Now, this is a lesson I'm going to build on later, so keep it in mind. In the meantime, why would someone who can't even afford groceries even think about buying real estate? Well, my dad inspired me. A hard-working roofer for 50 years. I mean, he could fix just about anything. Like, for my 16th birthday, we bought this old, beat-up 65 Mustang together. We worked on that car for years until it was purring like a kitten. I'll never forget one day when I was 23 years old, Dad and I were working on that car, when Dad forgot the name of his favorite burger spot. Frightening, because nobody forgets In-N-Out Burger. A few weeks later, the doctors confirmed my 67-year-old father had Alzheimer's. I mean, are you kidding me? Dad's our rock. He's our breadwinner. And my blue-collar middle-class family, we weren't prepared for that. I mean, we lived paycheck to paycheck. Turns out, as Dad's disease progressed, it would cost us $7,000 a month to take care of him. I mean, what about his Social Security? Not enough. Medicare? They said no. I mean, what does it cost to retire in America today? My family needed over $1 million to take care of my dad. And with so many American families struggling like mine, I gotta wonder, where is all the money going? Where else would it go? To corporation owners. Get this, in 2018, the top 3 richest people in our country had more wealth than the bottom half of our entire nation. It's hard being on the bottom all the time. And growing up with such gross inequality like this, I thought I only had 2 options. Either be a capitalist pig and take advantage of people in order to get ahead, or work hard, stay broke, but be a decent person. Now, my family's financial crisis got me thinking, what if things aren't so binary? I had to find a way to help my family without harming other people. And at this point, I was 27 years old. Dad's disease was progressing, and I'm stressing because police found him miles from home, wandering alone. My family was running out of options. Fortunately, I just started my lucrative career as a social worker. So I did what any millennial would do, trying to solve a major life crisis. I rolled up my sleeves and I Googled it. How to build wealth, which led me to buying real estate. Now, I read all the books and listened to the top podcasts, all while I worked overtime for a year at my job, saving up for my down payment. My social work buddies, they teased me. They called me Zillow. But joke's on them, because a few months later, I found a duplex that even I could afford. And I could fix it up with the money I had left, enough to sell it for a profit, enough to take care of my dad for an entire year. I couldn't wait to tell him the good news. But before I could book my ticket home, my sister called me instead. She said Dad had taken a turn for the worse. And I was too late. He was dying. Days later, I sat at my dad's hospital bedside, holding his hand one last time, in shock. I felt outraged. This is not how the story was supposed to end. Work hard for 50 years, live paycheck to paycheck with no retirement? My dad's death taught me that hard work isn't enough to retire in America anymore. And if hard work didn't pay off for him in the end, then I wasn't going to go back to work again. So what did I do? With $16,000 left to my name, I quit my job as a social worker. I was going to become a real estate entrepreneur or go back to dumpster diving. One of the two. Just one little problem. How was I supposed to buy more real estate when I didn't have a job? I mean, no bank was going to give me a loan. This wasn't 2007, after all. So naturally, the first thing I did was I spent half my life savings on a real estate boot camp. But here's the thing. It worked. And I'm going to share it with you now, but for free. For many of us, owning a property feels like a distant dream. My coaching students, they come to me saying, I can't qualify for a loan. Housing is so expensive, not enough for the down payment. Interest rates are too high. But all of these problems have one thing in common. The banks. Here's the big secret. We don't need the banks. We can do it on our own. Seller financing is when a home buyer pays a seller directly. Instead of using a bank loan, it's like the seller becomes the bank and they keep all of the interest. It's just two people working together, cutting out the middleman, the banks. I mean, this is how we bought and sold properties before the banks got involved in the 1930s. And some of you are old enough to remember that seller financing was even popular in the 70s and 80s. Now, after learning this, I knew I had to find the right seller to partner with me. So I searched high and low in my community. I sent letters to strangers. I called people I didn't even know, which eventually led me to a bar with a 65-year-old guy named Kelly on a Tuesday night. I was broke, and Kelly owned real estate. I wanted to invest, and Kelly was ready to retire. We were a match made for each other. How did I buy his triplex with only $500 out of pocket? Because it was a great deal for Kelly, too. He earned hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest, money I would have just given to the banks. And in return, he gave me access to buying property. Well, at first he wanted $75,000 down. And I didn't have that. I mean, you know me. I like charcuterie. So then I said, well, what would it cost for you to foreclose on me? I mean, after all, he was an attorney, and he said $15,000. I said, great, let's make that the down payment. If I don't pay you, you can use my own money to foreclose on me. And he agreed. But you know me. I didn't have $15,000 either. So he let me raise money with friends until I only paid $500 out of pocket. No bank would do that. Now, all of this led me to update my prior calculation. I learned that community plus creativity plus equity means a whole lot of money for all of us. And using this equation, I co-created more of these types of win-win partnerships. I bought folks' properties, rented them out, and we split the profits. In just 5 years after quitting my day job as a social worker, I had built 6-figure financial freedom for myself, while also helping a handful of neighbors retire in the process. Well, the ones daring enough to trust a dumpster diving social worker like me. Seller financing taught me that I could bank on my neighbor instead of banking on a financial institution. And through seller financing, we can take care of our elders in retirement while we help the next generation to become homeowners. Imagine the impact if only more people knew about this. Seller financing keeps wealth in our communities. It's like a garden. To grow good quality food, we need to have good soil. And the same is true financially. To thrive, we need to keep money in our local economy. When you get a loan from the bank, that money and those nutrients leave our neighborhood soil to some banker's farm in the Hamptons. But when we lend to one another directly through seller financing, then that money stays in our neighborhoods. Together, we can redirect wealth away from Wall Street back into our communities. So, if you're wondering how to get started, I'd like you to ask a different question instead. Not how, but who. Who do you know who has equity to lend? Who do you know who wants to retire? Who do you know who believes in community? Too often when we think about investing, we think about money capital. But the capital that greases the wheels of seller financing is social capital. All you need is two willing people, one who has equity to lend in their property and one who is trustworthy enough to borrow it. Look for people who own rental properties, people looking to downsize and retire. Anyone with equity can become a lender. So, how do you find a neighbor that you can bank on? Well, seller financing is actually a lot like dating. Except better, because you don't have to swipe on a pic of someone holding up a fish. Like, if you want to attract a great partner, start by becoming your best self. Demonstrate responsibility. And you may need to kiss a lot of frogs before you find your princess. But who knows, you might already know them. Oh, and don't be surprised if you fall in love with the people you meet along the way. I started my speech today saying that I had a love story to share. And well, Kelly and his wife Susan and I became dear friends after I bought their triplex. This year, as I was writing my book, they gave me some feedback over dinner. And I'll never forget what Kelly said to me. He said, "Now I will have known two renowned female authors." Said with such certainty that it brought me to tears. Kelly and Susan loaned me $700,000 back when we were only strangers. I mean, why trust me over the bank? Well, besides the $242,000 I will have paid them in interest, and the fact they could always take the property back if I ever stopped paying them, there is one more reason. Here's why. Kelly told me about one Christmas when he was a little boy. His family invited a friend to join them for the holiday. She was a flight attendant, but too broke to fly home. She wanted to become an author one day. Now, Christmas morning, the family opened up all their gifts until it seemed like there was nothing left. That's when Kelly's mom said, "Don't worry, dear, we haven't forgotten you." And sure enough, there was one little envelope under the tree. She opened it up, her eyes grew wide. It read, "You have 1 year off from your job to write whatever you please. Merry Christmas." A dream come true. The family had a great year and they could afford to support her. They saw the value of investing in others. And one of those little boys grew up to be Kelly. And that's why he invested in me. And this is the love story I wanted to share with all of you. And while I've been sharing my story on this stage, I've also been sharing our story, the story of the American people. We all survived the banks collapsing. Many of us struggle to buy a home. Most of us are afraid of running out of money as we get old. The truth is, we could help each other. People say, be the change you want to see in the world. But I say, why should we settle just for change when we could be making dollars while we finance each other? And if enough of us believed we could bank on our neighbor, then we would change the world together. Speaking of changing the world, that flight attendant at Christmas, her name was Harper Lee, and she wrote To Kill a Mockingbird. Thank you.